Okay, hello everyone. So we're going to begin the panel portion of the program now, but I just wanted to, I know a lot of people here, but there are a few people that I don't know, and I just wanted to formally introduce myself. My name's Laura Sansone, and I'm an assistant professor of textiles at Parsons, where I develop curriculum and teach courses around ethical textile design practices and sustainable systems of design. But before I want to talk about Textile Lab and our carbon farm network that we're doing here. But before I do that, I just want to thank a few people. Lynn Edens, who is carrying chairs. Lynn and Stacey Chavez, who are hosting this event. So Lynn owns Little Creek Farm Alpaca, this gorgeous farm that we're standing on right now. And Stacey, we could not have this event without both of you, so thank you so much for this. Thank you. And I want to thank my Carbon Farm Network. Okay, so that's Gibson. Is he here? Where's Gibson? Oh my goodness, where did he go? Anyway, I'm acknowledging Gibson and he's not here. Gibson Durnford, he's our ag planner, and he is just incredibly generous with his time and his expertise, and we simply would not have a climate beneficial program here without Gibson. So I hope he's in earshot of what I'm saying. Oh, Gibson, I'm acknowledging you. Did you hear me acknowledging you? Did you? I was thanking you for all that you do. And then Haley Moore, who's my design assistant, and Haley's here. And Haley has been working with us from the beginning. She laid out the entire source book that everyone was flipping through. She develops my website. She's a wonderful designer, and I'm just so grateful for your talent. So thank you, Haley, for being here and helping organize this too. She does everything. Thank you. Okay. So, and Tegan as well, who's our photographer. Thank you, Tegan, for being here. And Tegan has also documented the source book and some of our products. So we're so happy you're here today documenting. Thank you. So I'm just going to talk for just a few minutes before we get to the panel about New York Textile Lab and the work with the carbon farm planning that we do. So New York Textile Lab is a design and consulting company, and we help designers source ethically and domestically and climate beneficially. And we also develop bioregional yarns that are sourced, spun, knit, and woven all within 300 miles of New York City. We are a Fibershed affiliate. Rebecca Burgess helped us bring the Climate Beneficial Initiative here, and we're working to develop that. So, what is the Carbon Farm Network? It's an interdependent group of farmers who are interested in implementing carbon farm practices on their lands, and designers who are interested in using climate beneficial fibers for their work. Okay, so that's really what it is. And Gibson, our ag planner, he works directly with the farms. He helps them implement best farm management practices around soil carbon sequestration, we have an application process for our farms. We collect data. We use the NRCS, which is a national template to collect data from the farms. This is the same data collection tool that Fibershed out on the West Coast is using. And then we also use Comment software, which is also from the USDA. So we're following the same protocols that the California Fibershed is following out on the West Coast to build our carbon farm plans. The most important thing for me as a designer with this carbon farming is that we're connecting farmers and designers together around this deep value of climate beneficial and carbon farming, which is so important right now. So for me, for New York Textile Lab, the work that I do, a big mission is moving designers to the beginning of the value chain, okay? because designers typically don't enter the value chain until they're buying materials from a distributor, or they're buying fabrics from a supplier. And as designers, we are problem solvers, right? So it doesn't make sense to enter the value chain so late when there's all of this room for intervention before you enter it. Okay, so connecting designers directly to their source is really super important to the work that I do. Now, why is this? When you look at a value chain, right, we're always looking at it in terms of dollars and cents, right? So you start with the raw fiber, and then you wash it, and then it's worth more, right? The value goes up. And then you process it, and the value goes up, right, et cetera. You turn it into yarn, the value goes up. You turn it into a product, okay? But we're really only looking at the dollar value there, okay? What we need to start doing as designers is looking at deep value flows. And that's really critical right now if we're going to tackle climate change and the socioeconomic problems that we're seeing in our clothing and textile production. So what are deep value flows? Well, deep value flows are carbon farming, right? It's about carbon sequestration. Like, I want to have the ability to make these decisions at the beginning of my process of making things. So maybe I want to invest in a farm like Little Creek Farm Alpaca that's actually sinking carbon, or Faraway Farm Alpaca, right? If you start thinking about value flows other than monetary value flows, there are so many, right? It could be like investing in farms that are cultivating biodiversity on their lands, or water quality health, or paying appropriate wages, to their workers, mills and farms. You could start really thinking about these alternative value flows, which we really have to do right now. The other thing that we have to tackle, as creative people is, and many of you understand this, when you look at that value chain, it's really built on extraction, consumption, and waste, right? And it's highly linear. We all know about that linear model, which is just not serving us at all. So what we need to do is we need to take those two ends of the value chain, right, and bend them into a circle so that they meet. That's what we need to do together, okay? It's really, really critical. Okay, when we start doing that, we can start making the changes that we really need to make, and we can start having more transparency as well. If we're moving ourselves to the beginning of that value chain, as I mentioned. So in terms of this circularity model, right, nature operates in circular systems. It doesn't operate in linear systems. So right here, these individuals that are on our panel, these amazing people, designers and activists, they are taking that value chain, bending it into a circular model in various ways, and everyone's going to learn about that today in the panel, okay? So I'm going to now take a minute. I'm going to introduce everybody. All right. So can you guys just raise your hand, because you're not in order, and that's fine. All right, so Meris Butler from Borobabi. Hold on a second. I'm on the wrong page. Sorry. Okay. Meris is the creative director and co-founder of Borobabi. Prior to Borobabi's birth, she launched her career as a sweater designer and has over a decade of industry experience at both contemporary and mass market retail brands. Meris is passionate about bringing all style lovers into the farm to fashion fold, and works hard to impress the importance of the closed loop system with every brand partnership she approaches at Borobabi. Most importantly, she is a proud mom to Declyn and Matheis. Thank you. Thank you for being here. Dana Davis, Vice President of Sustainability, Mara Hoffman. Dana, did you, okay. That's Dana. Dana Davis graduated from the Fashion Institute of Technology in New York City in 2003 and immediately co-founded a design label and retail store in Brooklyn, New York. After several years, her passion in production and design led to her to work across the apparel industries at various companies such as Urban Outfitters, Macy's, and Carlyle Group. In 2010, Dana was recruited by Mara Hoffman to lead and grow the company's production department. In 2012, Davis became the director of production and design and was integral in the company's transformation into a recognizable and widely distributed brand that it is today. In 2015, founder and president Mara Hoffman appointed Davis to spearhead the company's transition towards sustainability. Since then, the Mara Hoffman brand has taken critical steps to mapping, evaluating, and reconfiguring its supply chain in order to make positive changes. Thank you for being here, Dana. Leah D'Ambrosio, she's the founder and designer of Woolhide, and one of the designers in our Carbon Farm Network. And so is Meris, by the way. I didn't mention that. I'm so grateful for that to both of you. Leah D'Ambrosio grew up about a half an hour from this farm in a small town which instilled a lifelong appreciation for the land, farms, and local agriculture. With a background in fashion buying and retail management and an MS in textile design, she founded Woolhide in 2015 through a desire to create a brand whose priorities were more about people and the planet than the bottom line. Thank you for being here, Leah. And Jessica Kaur. So, and this is someone who I've taught with and I admire so much, and I work with Jessica. Jessica Kaur is an associate professor of design in the School of Design Strategies at Parsons and an award-winning product designer with experience in hospitality, retail design, and consumer goods. After many years consulting for international hospitality projects and teaching sustainable design practices at Parsons, Jessica recently launched PLIA, a collaborative initiative providing education, material research, and market-based solutions that foster regenerative and closed-loop design for the home. Thank you for being here. Okay, welcome. Oh my goodness. Oh, I'm so sorry. That is horrible. You were so important too. Jessica Schreiber does major work, and I have to tell you, it's because my papers. Save the best for last. Jessica, it's because my papers were not in order, and I have to tell you that you're on every syllabus of mine, like Fab Scrap. Okay, so Jessica Schreiber is the founder and CEO of Fab Scrap, an amazing organization. Jessica Schreiber she's the CEO of Fab Scrap, which provides convenient pickup and recycling of fabric scraps from businesses in New York City and creates opportunities for reuse. Prior to launching Fab Scrap, she worked in the Bureau of Recycling and Sustainability at the New York City Department of Sanitation. She has a master's degree in climate and society from the Earth Institute at Columbia University and has been featured in Forbes, CNN, Waste 360, and Apparel magazine. Thank you for being here. What led your company, to ethical sourcing initiatives? Was there a point of inflection, or was there a gradual recognition and shift? So, what led you to it? What led your company to it? What are the challenges to ethical regional sourcing other than monetary? Okay.
Well, thank you.
Do you want?
I think
It's better without?
Yeah.
Okay, so then let's lose this. We will lose the microphone.
You want no better with.
Oh, better with.
Oh.
That's fine. I'm just going to do this. I'm just going to do this.
I appreciate that.
Of course.
Well, thank you everyone for being here. As Laura mentioned, I come from the contemporary brand Mara Hoffman. We're actually 21 years old, and 15 years into the business was when the founder, Mara herself, turned to me and said, we can no longer do what we're doing, or we need to shut down this business. So my first reaction was like, okay, well, we're not going to shut down because I want a job. So let's figure out how we can change what we're doing. And what an amazing situation to be in, where, the founder of this company really truly understands the impact of the industry and turns to me and gives me the opportunity to change things. So one of the first things that we started transitioning to was looking into better materials and better sourcing habits, along with many other things. One coexisting with supply chain and transparency within within our fibers. And it was really, really hard to find what we call like sustainable fabrics then. And I'm so glad to say that has changed so much over the past 7 years. And we always kind of put importance on manufacturing in the U.S., but never were these actual materials coming from the U.S. as I'm sure many of you know, there's so few things that you can actually get that come through the U.S. that are then processed in the U.S. and that this full production cycle is done here. At some point, I don't know where wherever Stacy is, at some event years back, I met this woman, Stacy, who really inspired me about the eventual future vision she had of this idea of really creating this entire domestic supply chain within natural fibers. I met Laura at some point and got to see the work that she was doing, and again was really inspired by this like true ability to actually really manufacture something in the US from soil to finished goods, and brought this idea to Mara, and Mara said, yeah, figure it out, make it happen, and run with it. And that sounded like something that I could do, but to be honest with you, it was really hard. It's a very fragmented supply chain. There's not many people that actually exist who can do some of the quality of things that we were getting overseas. But by finding the right partners and finding people who have the right connections, it was possible. So even through COVID, we launched our first climate beneficial sweater program, and that was all really truly with the help of Stacy, and really figuring out how we could get the fiber, when we talked about the finishing, the dyeing, and then knitting those pieces here, all the way down to the labels being made in the US. I mean, every single component on these garments is manufactured in the US, and it felt like such a win because it has been such a challenge. But for the brand itself, I think the question that you asked was just the challenges outside of just the monetary. Is knowing your supply chain is really hard, so being able to gain that transparency, working domestic makes that a lot easier. You can visit with your suppliers much easier. You have a better relationship with them in a sense that you can show up in their facilities, but it doesn't necessarily make it easier. So it's just understanding the different challenges that they're having and how can you work together to continuously make improvements with what it is that they're doing. Lead times are challenging, right? So understanding how long maybe it takes to work some of these fibers through the system, price point is definitely usually a challenge, but that's when it takes getting a little bit more creative. How do you continuously work with one fiber? Maybe you're making a larger commitment up front, but you know that you have the ability to work with this fiber for longer periods of time, or you're working with it at a grade level, and you're dyeing small batches to really make sure that that you can continuously work with it. So even though those challenges do exist, there are solutions, and sometimes it just takes outside the box thinking from that traditional offshore manufacturing, traditional life cycle.
Thank you. Here, let me give you a wipe. And I really like the way you also I'm sorry this is so awkward, but okay. I like the way you also talked about the benefits as well. Really important, that there's more transparency on some level.
Thank you. So I am from Woolhide. I founded the brand about 5 years ago. And when I started, and even like before I started the brand, I was making knit garments myself, and I was working with domestic farms. I was actually working with Imperial stock when I first started. And then when I wanted to scale up just a little bit to not producing everything myself, it was really challenging to find sweater production domestically. And it was just not manageable. Like the cost of sampling and the minimums were just not manageable for me. So I ended up being able to go to Peru, and I found some factories to work with there. So I started doing my production in Peru. I do still make, and from the beginning have made loungewear that's with organic and domestic cotton sew. So that was a little bit easier. But so now that the brand is a little bit established and I have a little bit more predictability with revenue and minimums that I can meet and things like that, I've been trying to get back to some of the domestic production. And that's when I found Laura. I was looking for domestic yarn, and I was really inspired by her work and her mission, and thought that her yarn was beautiful as well. So that's also really important. So I sampled with her yarn, and it came out really beautiful. So last year was the first sweater with Laura's yarn that we launched, and so yeah, I think a lot of the same challenges that Dana mentioned, obviously a much smaller scale than Mara Hoffman, but still just trying to, like the lead times are an issue, and especially with COVID, there's a lot of unpredictability with lead times and delays that we're running into, and you know, sort of investing in this right now is like a little bit uncertain. But I think that it is really important work that's worth investing in. And, you know, I think that just taking, like knowing that maybe you can't solve the problem right now, but it's like a longer term problem that you can sort of like keep working at and eventually work it out, is sort of how I'm taking it. And yeah, definitely the cost is challenging, but again, figuring out how to work with that, and just, I think that also requires just a lot of education to the customers and to our wholesale partners about why it's expensive and why it's really important and all the work that goes into it, and people are understanding it. I think, you know, the first year we sold at wholesale, we didn't really sell that many, but the second year that we were selling wholesale, people were catching on and really getting excited about it, and so yeah, I don't know if there's I answered your question.
Yeah, great. Terrific. Yeah, thank you. Can I do one rebuttal? When we started working together, it was about 4 or 5 years ago. We now have 7 knitters across the country that we work with, and there's like a program for everyone now. And I've seen our knitting partners, like the sweaters. Yeah. You had some of these huge development. I thought they were huge, and they want $1,200 to develop a sweater. Where now we're $275 to $350, and if you make a commitment on the production, they'll take that off. And so there are some things changing, and it's really only happened, I'd say, in the last 2 years. There's been huge changes. The other big difference, which helps us get out in front of it, is we actually have one of the only domestic traceable production yarns on the shelf. So when you call me, I can not only give you 15 pounds for sampling, and you can do your colors. Now, we try to maintain 3,000 to 5,000 pounds of yarn on the shelf, which is really hard to do. And we don't know what that magic number is because it's a fairly new program. That crystal ball, it gets really, so I would say that is the biggest change in the last 4 years. Sorry.
So that's really great. That with what we're doing here in our Carbon Farm Network is really different. We're not, you know, we're kind of following the agricultural cycles, right? So we're actually making yarn once a season when the shearing happens. So it's sort of like we're disconnecting on some level from the rigor of the market, you know, with all of the seasons that you have to produce for. And we've had some success with designers like Leah and Meris, who are buying, and Clea, who are buying into, you know, our yarns. Even so, they have like a sort of, I mean, only because they only come once a year right now. I mean, that's where we are. You know, everything is growing, but it has a certain flow that's really different than what Cece's talking about.
Well, but what we got to do this year that was different is you were actually able to source and take advantage of our scouring of the wool, because we do keep our different ranches separate. So we were able to source New York fiber and have that available so that first step was done.
And so Laura could come to me, and at a good cost savings too, I think.
Yeah.
So there's so much new collaboration going on as we grow. Do you want to sit, Stacey?
No. I like hovering.
Okay. She's the hoverer. Okay. I think we'll move on to the next question, which is for Meris. So your company is built around the concept of circularity, both with your clothing rental model as well as your research about the potential to compost clothing that is no longer viable for circulation. Can you talk about the difficulties you face as you continue to build your brand around these circular and soil-to-soil models? Where do you see the need for design intervention to make these circular systems work at scale? It's a pretty complicated.
Oh, hold on. Yeah. I take my job very seriously.
Thank you.
Hi. Just to tell everyone a little bit about Borobabi, because I'm sure most of you are not familiar. We are America's first circular retailer for sustainable children's clothing. So we carry from newborn up to size 6. And we are slated to launch women's next fall. Yay! The Laura sweater. So we started in June of 2020, last year, and we sort of hit the ground running and have been expanding and growing at a super fast pace. Right now, there are a few ways where our customers can shop with us. We have online e-commerce where you can rent new or pre-loved clothing. You can also purchase new clothing with lifetime return guarantee. So that means whenever your children outgrow our clothing, you can send it back to us no matter the condition, and you get a 20% credit on something new with us. We also developed our bundle program where it's kind of like Stitch Fix, everyone relates the two, and parents can fill out a little survey and they get a personalized package of items for them and their child to shop from home, which worked out really well in the pandemic when we couldn't be in front of people and we were just trying to get product into people's hands. So that's become really popular with like our pre-loved renters online. And the latest exciting news is that we will be opening 3 retail locations in the country. So in our stores, you'll be able to purchase with lifetime return, and then returning customers can bring their stuff back to us in store, and we can develop a whole community of moms and parents that want to shop more sustainably. Thank you. 2 in New Jersey and 1 in San Francisco. So our whole goal is that we want our clothes back no matter what. So it doesn't matter if it's in a year, it doesn't matter if it's in 3 months. If you buy it, you can hand it down to a sibling of the same gender or not, or a cousin. As long as it comes back to us, then we've done our job. We take it back no matter the condition, so there's no penalty for stained clothing or damaged clothing. We take it back, we clean it, we repair it, and then it goes into our pre-love system for renters or pre-love purchases. So when we do get clothing back that is unwearable, we recycle it or we compost it. And we're the first ones to be doing that. And that's why I got so excited about Gibson's poop over there. We've been working with small local farmers to test this out. And we are so brand new that we don't have a ton of unusable clothing yet, thankfully. Like, kids are messy, but we do get a lot of it back in good condition. So really, the challenge for us is not managing the life cycle of the garment. It's more from the design and buying side, being able to source the right raw materials that can be responsibly managed at the end of life. So natural fibers, monofibers, completely staying away from synthetics. We also really pride ourselves in partnering with the right brands. So we source globally, and everyone that we work with manufactures ethically and uses natural and organic materials. And we also have a B Corp certified survey that we send out to all of our partner brands before we onboard them and decide to make that commitment to each other. So really, I think the biggest challenge, and I think this is an overarching challenge for the fashion industry, is just transparency, and I think you guys have already brought this up. But especially for us, when we're clothing children and babies, it's really important that there aren't other toxic chemicals and substances in the garments. So no formaldehyde, no harsh chemicals, no heavy metals. And then on the other side of it, after it's been worn and loved, we have to make sure that we're not putting that back in the ground. So for us, transparency is really key and critical. And that was one of the major benefits of using Laura's yarn, because she's super transparent and I got to meet the animal that grew the fiber. So it's really, really special and unique. And our ultimate goal is to be able to compost our used garments on the same farms where the animals are raised and regenerating.
So beautiful. I love that.
Thank you. Thank you. I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, no, you did. I want to just, did someone have something to say? Oh, I thought someone wanted to add.
I've got it down now.
Stacey.
You're recycling your
I just want to say that, well, first of all, your beautiful sweater's on our table, so please look at it. It's the white one that is cable, right?
It's a rib. It's a chunky rib.
Chunky rib, right?
This means rib, I guess.
Rib, chunky rib. So please do see it because it's really gorgeous. But I also, you pointed something out about the value chain and things that I was talking about before, and this is why it's so important to be able for designers to be able to have transparency and follow the materials all the way through that value chain. So if they do want to do something like composting at the end, they really understand what has gone into that material. So yes, I think that's a really great point that you're illuminating, so thank you. Okay, so Jessica Kaur from Plia. So hold on. Plia designs home furniture. Thank you. It's very confusing. No, I am on the questions. Thank you. So Plia designs home furnishing products manufactured in ways that address material life cycles and circularity. How can designers influence the end user's purchasing and disposal behavior in ways that benefit life on Earth? What is the biggest challenge with influencing the public to make better choices in what they purchase and use? Which is a really loaded question. That's hard. Yeah. And you might want to talk about Plia too.
Okay, I'll talk about Plia. Hi. Okay. So first, disclaimer, most of what I know about textiles comes from Laura, who I had the honor of co-teaching with many years ago and continue to learn from, so thank you. I am a furniture designer, and for a long time I was designing furniture for hospitality for hotels, international hotels. And when I first got started as a designer, one of the books that was very influential to me was Cradle to Cradle. I know some of you, awesome. And so while I was working in the hotel industry, there were different ways in which we would design. You can't put a West Elm chair into a hotel because it would be broken in a week. There's just too much wear and tear, too much use. So we were designing things for durability, like really durable furniture design. And, I try to think across systems and really thought, okay, this is what we need, because I'm seeing a lot of sofas on the curbs in the streets of Manhattan and Brooklyn and everywhere. And so there's a problem here. And what I found is in my own industry, the furniture, as durable as it is, it was being thrown out every 5 years, and the entire hotel would be upgraded, and this it's not just about producing waste, but these are valuable materials. We've already emitted greenhouse gases in order to have these materials extracted. So to keep them in functional use, of course, is what would be the most important thing to do to keep that value going. And so I realized that as a designer, we could just design differently. Like, let's start in the systems. Yes, we're talking about production, we're talking about extraction of materials, where do they grow, seasons, time is one of the systems we need to understand. But how do we design so that we're kind of moving across all of these systems? And design for disassembly is one of those things. So if we kind of deconstruct how we're designing and think about, maybe the way the furniture is being used, maybe it's the armrests that are being worn out. If those could just pop off and you keep the chair. And when it comes to hotels, that's 800 chairs, okay? We're trying to divert, large amounts of material from going into landfills, with one design move. So looking at that, how can designers design differently? How can we be part of a system of change just by knowing all of the cycles that something is going through? So there was a question that I already forgot.
Influencing the public, because I think that's a really big challenge, because as we try to remember, we're changing to a circular model, and it's not just it's not just the people on the producing end, it's also the people on the consuming end. So how do we start to address that and shift consumer behavior? Because that's really a big deal.
Thank you.
Right?
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. So moving out of hospitality, I co-founded Plia to kind of look at this on the consumer level. And we actually did start by photographing sofas thrown out on the curbs. And we talked to people at the DSNY, Department of Sanitation in New York, to find out, what's going on, what happens, these are valuable materials. And again, it came back to the way the sofa is made. And that also comes to the supply chain issues. We're having, to undo the way the world of manufacturing works, to undo, the quick ways in which they operate, that is a huge challenge. It takes a lot. But on the consumer side, one of the things that we thought was really important about being involved in Plia was to create things that people love. So we are trying not to shame people. We don't want them to feel bad. We want people to live a modern life. We realize that a lot of the way that we can move people to have better actions is to make something desirable, make it something that they want. And so one of the things that we're looking into is how can we tap in on the back end, tap into new supply chains, do the work, do the testing, think of alternative materials, and then how do we make something beautiful from that? How do we educate the manufacturers that we work with, and then take that to educating consumers? So I think there's a big piece in providing access to allow people in by putting something out there that is just beautiful, and then you've got their attention. You start to talk about, okay, well, this is a little different. We're not using wood. We're using another material because it renews much quicker. And at this point, just being honest about things. We know that people tend to, not everyone, but a lot of furniture is following fast fashion. So there is this cycle where I think the last statistic is that the average sofa lasts 5 to 7 years. People throw it out even before then because we've got these other systems that are working against us. We've got algorithms, we've got social media telling us we need a new style. So people will throw things out before before the function is no longer working. So just looking and trying to connect all of those systems and then making those ideas accessible is what we're trying to do at Plia. I hope I answered.
Thank you, Jessica. Oops, thanks. Great. So Abigail George Erickson just joined us. Thank you for finding us. No, it's great that you're.
A million text messages for me. I apologize.
Oh no, that's okay. All right, I'm so sorry. But I just want to introduce her really quickly because she's part of a very important program with Eileen Fisher, which is her Waste No More program. So Abigail began her career in the fashion industry a decade ago after graduating with a degree in fashion design and business. Her early training at Marie Claire magazine, Theory and TB, made her realize the importance of sustainability in fashion and how it's sorely lacking. This observation led her to the project On Purpose, a corporate social responsibility initiative by Kate Spade and Company. Erickson joined the Eileen Fisher Waste No More team in 2018 as the administrative and project manager. And you're here just in time for your question. So it worked out beautifully, actually. And I'm sorry, I hope you didn't stress out too much, okay? Because this is directed to Jessica Schreiber from Fab Scrap and Abigail from Eileen Fisher Waste No More. So both of your organizations address the waste component of the clothing and textile value chain. Jessica is tackling pre-consumer waste, and Abigail is working with post-consumer waste. Since you both see the waste stream up front and center regularly, I'd like you to comment on consumerism and the growth logic of our textile and clothing systems. This is a big one. This is a big question, okay? How can we collectively begin to address the impact that consumption is having on the environment and on human life? Okay, this really has to do with the growth logic. Who wants to go first? Tackle that. Okay. You'll settle. Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm just gonna. You might want to talk about Fab Scrap too, just for a few minutes, because it's such a great organization.
Hi everyone. A little bit about FabScrap. FabScrap is a nonprofit. We're based in New York City, and this fall we'll be opening a second location in Philadelphia. And we work primarily with fashion companies and collect all of the textile waste that is created during the design process. So all of the fabric waste before point of sale. We're working with about 600 brands now, and we're seeing everything from dead stock rolls of fabric, lots of cones of yarns, buttons, zippers, full leather skins, and by far what we receive the most of are fabric headers and fabric swatches, which mills send to brands so they can showcase the fabrics for the season. About 75% of what we get are headers. Not only are they mostly unusable, they're usually like a 6 by 6 inch square of fabric, they also take the most time to prep for recycling. We have to remove all the labels that has the mill information, the fabric information, remove stickers, staples, cardboard, etc. So we have a really robust community of volunteers. Our community coordinator, Damar, is here. We've had over 7,000 people come to FabScrap to help us sort through all of this textile waste, primarily headers, and prep it for recycling, where it gets shredded and becomes insulation, carpet padding, mattress stuffing, etc. Except we can't shred things with spandex. So we're also having volunteers pull out spandex scraps. Those we mostly work with boxing gyms. That's there's a sandbag core and then it's wrapped with fabric scraps. So we're working with boxing gyms there. And then we sort them by color and basically give them away. Our goal every year is to give away as much fabric as we sell. And so we've opened thrift stores. We have an online store you can shop from our warehouse, and it's all designer fabric, saved from landfill, smaller quantities, smaller prices. So we're really catering to the next generation of designer who's looking for a sustainable start and a sustainable source for fabric. So consumerism. It's hard, I guess. I started my career at sanitation, where I was working in post-consumer clothing recycling. I was there when sanitation launched their clothing recycling program for apartment buildings called Refashion NYC, which if you live in the city, it's a free program, so you can donate your clothing from home. You should look into that. And then was there when they piloted curbside collection of clothing for all of the single-family homes who couldn't participate in the apartment program. So I saw a lot of the death of fashion, the end of fashion, the waste of fashion. Right when I left, we were collecting 250,000 pounds a month from New York City residents. Our 5 boroughs throw out 200,000 tons of clothing every year, which is 14 times the weight of the Brooklyn Bridge. So it's a massive amount of waste. So in consumerism, part of, I think, what people have touched on is there is an excess and it's more affordable than it's ever been, and so it's easier to overconsume. So I think that's part of it. On the brand side, where we're working at FabScrap, it's hard sometimes because I hear some brands say like, well, the real solution is we just stop making clothing, like we just like don't exist. And I don't think that's like the direction that the industry's headed. And so instead, I think where consumerism plays a role is that there is sort of a changing sentiment among customers about why they're buying, where they're buying, how they're buying. And I see 2 things from brands. One is that customers don't care. They're gonna buy the cheapest thing. They wanna see new. And the other is that customers are so super educated, and if we tell them about this 10% change, it's not gonna be enough, so I'm not gonna say anything until we're like 100% there. And I don't think sustainability happens overnight. I don't think there is 100%. And so a lot of brands that we work with end up staying anonymous. We don't share their logo on their website on our website by their request. They're afraid to say anything about the steps that they're taking, the work that they're doing. So there's this competing sort of view of the consumer, but what I hear in both of that is that they're really listening to what consumers want. And so that's where I think consumerism does have some power. They are wanting to meet consumer needs. And so when things like Fashion Revolution and Who Made My Clothes happen, I do see some of that play out. That's about as much as I can say about consumerism. I don't know how to solve it.
A really hard problem to solve.
Hi, everyone. So I think, yeah, consumerism's a big one. I think what we're doing at Eileen Fisher and what we can all do as individuals, because it's so big and it makes you feel helpless. I know I feel helpless on a personal level. You know, we all just feel like, what can we do? And does it really matter? You know? But I can speak on what we're doing at Eileen Fisher because I think Eileen has made a ton of headway. Echoing what Jess said, it's not something that happens overnight, and you really have to be in it for the long haul, on a personal level, on a business level. So what we do is really looking at the microcosm that is our business. So when Eileen started over 30 years ago, you know, she started with simple shapes, and she wanted timeless design, you know, with the belief that good design and good material is inherently sustainable, meaning people will keep it in their closets for longer. And that says something. The longer they hold on to it, the better. So she has this history of problem solving, and then she realized that the sale of the garment is not the end of the company's responsibility. And that, you know, that really came to her mind in 2009, where we're selling these amazing products, but now where are they ending up? You know, and like Jess said, they're getting thrown away. They're being, you know, thrown in landfills. And so yes, we would love to take care of the industry's waste, but we can't do that. So how can we take care of our waste? So in 2009, she started the Take Back program. Solving that problem then created another problem, which was, okay, we're buying back all these garments, and these garments can be resold, and they're really beautiful, and they can have another life. But then there's 40% of these garments that can't be resold. They're damaged beyond repair. They have holes. Someone put a wool sweater in a dryer, and now it's for like a baby, you know? So then Waste No More was birthed from that about 3 years ago, and that's the team that I'm on. And what we do is we take garments and we deconstruct them, we layer them, and we use a felt-like needle punching technique and turn them into a whole new product that can be then made into Eileen Fisher handbags, pillows, artworks, interiors. So the point is one problem, solving one problem reveals another one. And so it's this slow, progressive, drawn out, you know, and we're just slowly looking like this year, how can we be 5% better than we were last year? And I think that can also apply to our personal lives. How can we just be slightly better? How can I, you know, wake up 5 minutes earlier to get stretches in before I go to work? It's those little tiny baby steps. And I think that has really been a huge part of Eileen's success. Is she is not a get rich quick overnight kind of person. She's in it for the long haul. She's very focused. She keeps the company very focused and very committed. So it's just these little tiny baby steps. And I think that in our society today with social media and instant gratification, that is not, that's not part of our culture anymore. But I do think that is actually where the real change is at. And I do think the other thing is it just takes time. It takes time for consumers' behaviors to change. We're really noticing Gen Z is very different. Their relationship to clothing and what they purchase in general is very, very different than millennials and especially baby boomers. They love secondhand. The secondhand market is growing exponentially. Our renew business, our resale business is extremely profitable for us, and it's only growing. There's a demand there, and we're seeing that. Our Waste No More business is smaller, and we're like little babies, toddlers. We're not profitable, but we're getting there. But there's also I know I caught the end of yours, but you talked about education being a huge piece. I think where we're at and where we're trying to educate our customers is that secondhand, our second life clothing, our resell, and then our Waste No More, our remade, is not lesser than brand new clothing. And that's something we're constantly trying to preach. It's not lesser than. It's different and it's upcycled. Gen Z understands that and they love that and they demand that. So I think it's one of those things, you know, when Eileen started the Take Back program in 2009, she didn't know what she was going to do with these garments. But she knew that it was her responsibility to take them back and to pay for storage until she figured it out. But now the market is starting to catch up to us. You know, we've been doing this for 12 years, and it's slow, but I do think it's kind of all of these kind of different avenues coming together, and I think they are going to merge at a point. But I also think there's going to be a level of people that just, more unconscious consumers that maybe don't care or don't have the means. I think there's always probably going to be a level of fast fashion. It would just nice to see the tipping point where, fast fashion is the smaller level of purchasing and more sustainable companies can kind of start to lead the way.
Everything's interconnected. That's something that we really have to really understand moving forward, is that our choices affect something else, because we're trained to be analytic about things and just separate things into their different components, but in reality, that's not how nature works, and we need to respond to our environment more, so I love that you pointed that out. That's really super important. So we have some time for questions. So I wanted to open up questions to the audience. Who has questions? Yes, please, Christina. Christine, here, do you want to?
Yeah, I think I can.
Yeah? Okay. Hand it off.
Hi, I'm Christine. I am a cashmere farmer in upstate New York. And my question to you is, we've recently gotten a number of cashmere farms and are trying to basically, kick off a company that involved the first U.S. cashmere to be sourced. And it's tricky, like you said, there's more moving nuts and bolts, scouring, the process. And Laura has been very, very supportive, and she actually has a lot of good answers. But what would be some of your advice to, farmers are not good at promoting themselves. They are not business-wise. It's very hard for them. And to be a good middle person and yet give them a fair wage. Any advice on how to get out there and be true to the farmer and be able to source? I know, we've talked before, and I think it's probably...
Linking with these guys is probably the best you can
connect, okay.
Yeah, and
Right. And do you think there's a future for sourcing U.S. cashmere for future products with either blending or...
I got excited about it, so I don't know if
Well,
I'm
maybe
myself, but yeah.
Okay.
I think if you could simultaneously work on finding a facility who can mechanically recycle it for you, knowing that then there's some type of circular system.
I think it's really important if we're starting new systems to think about that whole life cycle. And when we're talking about circular systems, cashmere is an amazing yarn that can be mechanically recycled and used over and over again. Some of the challenges we know are price points and accessibility, and there's probably a large feedstock. I bet Eileen Fisher's got a great feedstock of cashmere that they could give you. So I think reach out to brands directly, schedule meetings with them who are already maybe in the space or sourcing domestically, and talk to them and find out what challenges they've had and successes, so you can implement those into your strategy. But I think it's also really important to be thinking about end of life through this process. Yeah.
Any other questions? Please don't be shy. Ooh, yes. Would you like the microphone?
Oh, no, I'll speak loud.
Sorry, that was...
Are any of you working with cellulose fibers that cover a similar geography, like the whole supply, like growth and supply chain, or manufacturing in the U.S.?
Yeah, I am. I work with
Organic domestic cotton, but not for sweaters. For cut and sew knits. So I make loungewear. Like this T-shirt is domestic organic cotton that's undyed, and it's processed in North Carolina. It's grown in Texas, and then for me, it's sewn in Pennsylvania. And the processing is also it's done with like the dyeing is low impact dyes, and then the natural that's undyed is they use like plant-based alternatives to chemicals, like for a scour and for washing, and it's a closed loop system, so all the water is recycled and reused, and yeah, it's a nice process. Yeah.
Yeah, I have a question about the composting. Because you agree that you're going to compost it, none of your clothes have any spandex.
Right.
At all.
Right. Anything that we would compost would not have a lasting.
So the challenge is, I guess, for children's clothes, you could work around with looseness, but for, everyone else.
We do have, like leggings,
leggings oftentimes have elastane in them. So if it's under a certain percentage, we are able to recycle it. So there's just some fabrics that won't be able to be composted.
That's what, I mean, I think like for the supply chain in America, that's like
Everything has spandex in it.
we're talking about like 1% of clothes that really should be composted.
Yeah. Well, a large part of our collection is monofibers, spandex free. So we make sure when I'm buying that that's what I'm buying.
Yeah. And so like elastics, like you would just like
Remove it.
Right.
Yep, any trims. No, we have to cut them up.
And then how does Mara deal with the swimwear?
Swimwear is the biggest challenge that exists. Any performance fiber, there's options that exist that are recycled elastane. Roika is the only company I think in the world that makes a recycled elastane right now. But separating out a polyester and a spandex at the percentage for swimwear or anything performance does not exist. So I think anybody in the industry knows that we are very far behind in scaling innovation to get to the place of actually being able to upcycle, recycle any of those things. So I think when we talk about conscious consumption, like those are the ways to also educate, the customer. How do you keep a garment in its current state for as long as possible? How do you create systems where they can bring it back and you can resell it? But the answer is there's no such thing as a sustainable performance fiber. You can use a recycled polyester or recycled nylon, but it does not exist. Yeah.
Thank you. Question?
I had a follow-up about the composting. Is wool composting happening at scale? Like, are there good models for this? And
There's not. We're the first ones to be testing this. So our problem is we need help testing and scaling. So we're just a tiny brand accumulating what we can, and that's usable for compost. But we would love to partner up with bigger farms and scientists, really, who know the proper testing to ensure that there's nothing transferring into the soil.
So I have something I want to add to that because, Gibson and I have both been trying to help Borobabi, with this mission because it's really important right now. I mean, Fibershed has this inspirational systems map of the soil to soil that some of you might be familiar with. And we need to be doing it for real. And it requires some really serious R&D. We have to understand, the heat of compost pile, what does it take to break down the fibers? How do different fibers react and how do they affect the compost? And we've approached a few farms, but it's there's an art to composting, and farmers put a lot of effort into building their compost in a way that is where they can use it, and so it's difficult. We need to find partners that can really just dedicate some of their compost to this mission, which is really important. So yeah. Questions? Yes.
Hey, Laura. Sorry, just on that, can I chime in?
Oh yeah, Gibson, please. Yeah.
So, clothing totally different. We work with a really lovely small farm. Well, it's not such a small farm that does livestock production, and they produce sheep for meat, and they're able to compost their wool completely. Cooks really fast as part of their offal composting. So.
is it after it's already been produced into a garment, or
No,
just
so
the
it's kind of the more like
Yeah.
raw right off. They're slaughtering for meat production, so it goes right in the compost pile. So, the idea is there, and we can see it work really, really effectively on that farm. And then they use that for their, that's 100% of the nutrient they put on their field. There's no other. So it's there, but it gets more complicated when you have clothing and you're looking at, what else is in that clothing, stitching, everything on farm spins. Right, like when you're spreading manure, it spins. So thin fibers that are not broken down could be really catastrophic for prize manure spreaders. So it's just a little more complicated, but in general, it's theoretically doable. Which is why we're excited with working with Borobabi to figure out how to do it.
That's right, and maybe there needs to be another step, where we're shredding things like a shoddy machine, that's actually shredding. I mean, that could be something that is worked into the system. Yeah, but we're grateful that you're doing this work for sure. Yes.
So, with the last 20 years and the advent of stretch denim, and everybody in this audience probably has owned a pair at some point. We talked about how to recycle natural fiber garments. What do we do when that stretch denim blows out? You can't repair it. Like these are 20-year-old APCs I've sewn 100 times. But if my J brands blow out, I put them in the bin because you can't restitch that. And now I'm working for a sportswear company that sells Lycra. And I recently saw a horrific photo of Lycra broken down and just the strands of the framework of the garment. How can I be a good partner and advise my consumers to recycle that better or to do better with the life cycle of that garment?
Of the garment that has the Lycra in it.
Yeah, they all do.
Oh, I know. I mean, this is the problem. Listen, I go to great strides to find like denim that doesn't have Lycra in it.
Few and far.
So hard.
Yeah.
It does exist, but yeah. Oh yeah, please.
So as far as the denim, we just started working with Blue Jeans Go Green, and they said denim is with 10% or less spandex, which really covers a lot of it. I think most things are like 5 to 7. So we've been able to, where before we were sorting out denim with spandex and just keeping it for a while, or it was becoming art projects, etc. Now we're moving that directly to Blue Jeans Go Green, and they're creating the same insulation, but solely from denim, and they're working with Habitat for Humanity to then provide that insulation into new construction. So like next week, actually, we're moving like 4,000 pounds of denim to them, and that's where a lot of the like jeans take back programs are working with. So the jean take backs, I feel pretty good about. There's like actually a system for that, and it's 10% or less. That's something.
I think there's also, we're at the cusp of that, that scaling of innovation. There's quite a few companies, even ones who are domestic, who are able to separate out that, even polyester and cotton, which hasn't existed, and are creating new yarns, which are coming to market within the next year. So I think we'll see such a big change in that. But denim, for the most part, there are also companies that exist that you can send your denim back to them. They're overseas, but that they can take that and then turn that back into recycled yarn as well. So it's a lot of extra steps, not so easy to the customer, but it does exist.
Yeah, please. I'm sorry, everyone.
Sorry. One of the things I think if we go back to what can I do or what can a consumer do, some of that comes down to voting. Of course, everyone knows that, but there are extended producer responsibility laws that have been put, on state by state passes legislation. And I think if we start seeing models like that and can put that forward, it will, kind of force more companies to say, okay, we have to take back whatever we produce. I mean, here everyone is producing and taking back what they produce or manufacture and trying to find ways to, be responsible. But as a consumer, in many ways, it's about watching, what can we vote for? What are the things that are, that we can ask our legislators to put in place in terms of manufacturing and responsibility?
No, I think you're right. We actually just had a big internal sustainability team with the leaders of Eileen Fisher last week, and that's what came up. That's really where we're at. It has to come down to policy. I really feel like that's the point we're at. Like, the individuals can do as much as they want, but it truly comes down to policy and law. So something we're talking about as a company is, how do we fund money? How do we get brands together to come up with money to get lobbyists to lobby for better policy? Because that's ultimately, I think, where this kind of tipping point that we're at. We need the laws to back the work that we're doing. Some of it's just going to have to be mandated, or it's never going to change. The other thing about what you were saying, we have the same issue. I think we all do, that work with spandex and synthetics. I mean, we are sitting, Eileen Fisher, we take back about 20,000 garments a month from our customers. We're fortunate. We can resell our garments and Waste No More can exist because we have extremely good, high quality first life garments, so a lot of it can be upcycled, but there's a lot that can't. and it's sitting in a huge warehouse, and we are committed to sitting on it and paying for that rent until we can come up with a solution. We're working with a company out of Europe. America is so behind in so many ways, especially when it comes to anything sustainable, whether it be food, cars, clothing. We're always behind the game on that, capitalism. But we're working with a company called Pentatonic based out of Europe, and they don't have the answers, but they are working with a lot of really smart companies, and I think they're very close. And they're getting there. It just is going to take more time for the technology to catch up with what our problems are. I read this great article, and it's like all of our problems with global warming and waste were human-made, and I do think we're smart enough to come up with the solution. You know, we hold the solution. We just need some time. And then on denim, we can, the 10% or less is there's definitely some possibility. We can felt with denim, which is great. I think denim is great because there is a lot of solutions. Again, separating the fibers. The New Denim Project is a company you should look up. I'm sure you're familiar with them. Yeah, they're super cool. So, yeah, that's really all I had.
Do you, like at Eileen Fisher, do you have like a maximum output? Do you know what I mean? Like a tipping point. Like what's like the maximum output of alpacas here until it's not like sustainable? Or like what's the maximum output of denim that you can do knowing it has a lifespan of like 3 or 4 years? Because you know, like the input should be like the input should equal the output.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? So it's like that kind of like how, like, do you guys do the math for that, or at this point like it's not?
So I think for Renew, it's different. For the resale piece, it's different because the demand is there. We just need to, you know, update our systems to meet that demand. For Waste No More, I think we are still very much in a phase where there is, and we're trying to close that gap to, you know, input matches output. We're not there. We're not anywhere close to being there. There's a huge gap between what we're receiving in and what we're able to put out. And it's been a huge goal of ours to close that gap. And that is part of our scalability and Eileen's like mission to prove that this business model works. So we're still very much in the experimental phase, but absolutely that's something that we're always looking at and trying to close the gap on, but I don't think we're very close to that. Yes?
I don't, and excuse if this is like a naive question. So I understand there's bacteria that can eat plastics and there's mealworms that can eat styrofoam. Why isn't there more interest or push for like going, instead of like recycling, going down the natural, finding these organisms and supporting them that can like manage it? Yeah. What, I mean.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's part of like, you know, you mean of the synthetics specifically?
Yeah.
Or, you know, because with natural fibers, you know, there's this, you know, possibility of really scaling composting to, you know, to break them down.
Yeah, but I'm talking about like the synthetics.
Yeah.
Like, because there are organisms that are alive and can do it. I just don't understand why it's not, like I have chickens and I'd like to be buying like the mealworms from the people who are feeding them the styrofoam because they're totally like, you know, it's
I love
fine.
that.
But I can't find anybody that does that.
Right.
I just know it exists, you know?
Yeah, I mean, you know, there's a lot of development in biotextiles, you know, like, you know, but you know, the truth is that we can't, it's really about scaling, going back to some of the things that you were, you know, it's like, I think that's really the challenge here is we have to look at scale and the growth logic of our systems and how they grow, so that, you know, we don't have, so we can't simply look at things through a green lens anymore, you know, and say, okay, we're going to replace cotton with hemp, or, you know, we're going to use this biomaterial, you know, this that's derived from sugarcane, you know, like spider silk, you know, or we can't, because it disrupts our natural systems and the balance. Nature is all about shifting balances, so we have to start working in that in that mindset.
Yeah, I'm just curious why I haven't seen evidence of that. Like,
there is evidence. I mean, the research is being done.
Yeah.
It's just to scale it up, right? Of like
What happened?
What
like, is it just
takes
because
to
they're kind of like gross and not cool?
it's
to, like,
also-
look
No,
at?
I mean,
Or,
the
like, I'm
research
just
is there, so even like we could recreate an enzyme.
I think it's about funding as well. I think it's still early, and I think funding is a big problem. We just, it comes back to the bottom line. If there's no, it's not easy, it's not inexpensive, it's hard to move people. So I agree with you. I mean, I'm frustrated as well. We know what's possible, and we're just trying to scale it and move it.
So I think for us at Borobabi, unless it's got certified and definitely 100% organic, like we don't want to try testing anything that might have some sort of like finishing on it. None of our sleepwear has flame retardants. That's like a huge thing that happens in the American markets, is that they put flame retardants on children's PJs. Why? Nobody knows. So I think for us, especially starting out like this, we want to stay away from anything that might possibly have a chemical. Yeah. I hope I know the answer.
So, because we work with a lot of brands, we work with a few that are children clothing companies, and rather than donate, they're sending them to us for destruction because they aren't treated with the fireproofing chemicals. They said, like, we can't send them to market without the fireproofing chemicals. So it sounds like you're getting around that somehow.
Yeah, none of our PJs have fire retardants.
And they're, like, legal?
I hope so. Otherwise, I'm running to my car right now.
We were told, because initially when they were like, it's massive amounts of clothing. It was probably 80 boxes of children's clothing that we picked up, and like our first question was, why can't we donate this? And they said, because it's not treated, they're just samples. They won't fire treat the samples because they're not planning to sell them, so they're saving that cost. So their answer was like, it can't go. Like, it just is like not legal for us to provide this to market.
Yeah, we buy primarily from European brands, and none of them that we buy from have flame retardants or any of those chemicals added, and we haven't had any issue selling them. So.
If you sell to large retailers, you're required to have them tested, and they need to follow the standards that are set out by the National Retail Federation.
If you're selling your independent brand, you're being held responsible. So if someone was to come at a claim and saying based on X, Y, and Z, so you just want to ensure that you have the certificates behind the fabrics that you're purchasing. But if you're working with a big brand who's selling at a large retailer, that is the law. Yeah, exactly.
On that note, just because we were talking about policy, I just don't when crafting policy, I feel like it's important to think about those unintended consequences, because maybe this was a policy at its time that was trying to do something good and protect babies, but at this point it's really hard for us to fight it because it seems like we're against protecting children. but it's creating a massive amount of waste. We definitely pick up from them several times a year, each production cycle, all of their samples, and so there's some unintended consequences to some policies, and so I think it's important for not just the industry to be at the table, and not just lobbyists, but sort of like everyone's saying, the full systems.
I think parsing, what is law and what is an insurance liability is also really important as well, because that comes into play. And in terms of furniture design, it's about putting a tag on it that says this contains no flame retardants. You just have to be transparent. It's interesting. That's the one place where you have to be transparent to the consumer. And then you can, put it into the marketplace. But it's also a problem in furniture where you can't resell furniture if those tags have been removed. It's very difficult. And you're right, it does have to do with laws and also insurance policies and being aligned with certifications.
Yeah, Nicole, that's such a great thing to bring up, right? Because it becomes like this quagmire of like information, and it's confusing to designers and to consumers, you know, in terms of like what to choose in terms of materials and products. So does anyone have any thoughts about that? I mean, yeah, Dana? Oh.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really hard. Like, normally we tend to say, like, rely on certification, but then that also puts a lot of people out of the picture, right? You have a lot of small farmers or small weavers or small, you know, businesses that can't afford certification but are doing the right thing. So I think it's the due diligence that you do. So reaching out to the brand, talking to them, you know, getting a better understanding of how they operate, knowing that where the brand is on the journey. You know, do they have, again, some type of take back program? Are they really truly invested in the greater good of the people and the planet? And then you kind of got to go with your gut. It's, you know, I think like Laura said, it's brand, we have a hard time navigating around it. How can we put that onus on the consumer? It's near impossible. So just educating the consumer in the store of why you chose a brand, whether it's made in the US or it's based on the fibers, or, you know, kind of coming up with the pillars of what you see as important, and then supporting those brands.
So do you think, like, you know, I know now, but I think traceability is the biggest. When I open up a page on a product, I'm looking for the story, I'm looking to go deeper into how that product, and maybe that's just me, or maybe the new generation is hoping to look at that more carefully. But I'm looking for real answers, not just a pretty picture, hopefully, with the traceability.
Yeah, you're talking about these deep value flows that you know I spoke of earlier. Really important. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and you know there are consumer advocacy groups like Good on You is one where you can go and research about brands. But again, like, you know, coming from the end of someone who's making stuff, you know, as many of us are. It's just so important to put yourself at the beginning of that value chain so you really know what's going on, and you know, to dig deep as a consumer. You just have to dig deep and try to, you know, recognize greenwashing when you see it. It's hard. It's not always easy too.
I think it's also hard as like a brand to be able to, like, for me sometimes I feel like, well, is a consumer gonna like think or understand that that I'm like really caring about this, or are they just gonna read this and think like, oh, you know, this could just be greenwashing? So I think it's a challenge on both ends, and I think like maybe back to policy, there's no guidance as far as like sustainability is a word that just kind of means a lot and means nothing at the same time, and so there's no guidelines, and people can have all these claims and say that they're doing this and that, but it can be really deceiving. And, you know, hopefully in the near future we'll have some more guidelines that brands can follow and consumers can understand.
The fashion Caesar, you know, that there was a publication that came out that the FTC green guides haven't been updated in years. So there are brands that have been writing to legislation to get them to update that, so that brands are held accountable to the claims that they're making. So again, it goes back to that policy of really pushing forward and making sure that those guidelines exist and that somebody is out there regulating brands for the claims that they're making. But over in Europe, as was mentioned, they're much further along ahead, and a lot of those laws have already been passed. So I think we're trying to follow the European Commission and as a country here and use them and set them as a standard, and how can we kind of follow along. But it's taking the brands and the people to come together to rally for those changes.
Thank you. You know, I can't really speak to that too much yet. That's what we need to test and we need to discover is what dyes will permeate the soil and leave toxic elements, and I'm assuming all of the natural dyes will be totally fine.
Yeah, so just because it's a natural dye, the mordant might not be natural. So, you know, you need to have an RSL, a restricted substance list, that then ties into the composting and what levels that they're able to take, and then you're working simultaneously to create, you know, what those standards are for that compost facility. As we discussed, every compost facility is totally different of what they need in their soil to, you know, for feeding mechanism, so it depends. But it's a good question, and I think, you know, if we're dying for compostability, then you need to ensure that there's different materials within that dye. So you kind of have to build up that RSL based on the components for the compost.
I so appreciate what all of you do, so thank you so much.